Hello and welcome to the Global Summit on Economic Abuse. I'm Julie Kun, joining you from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'm acting CEO of Women's with Disabilities Victoria and a consultant with a focus on intersectional, evidence-informed strategies to combat economic abuse and promote social justice. I'm also the chair of Gender Equity Victoria. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some general housekeeping. You are signed in as a participant and your camera and microphone are disabled. Today's session will be recorded for future viewing. If the contents of this session raise any issues for you, we encourage you to take whatever steps you need to prioritise your own well-being. If you'd like to reach out for support, you'll find a link in the chat to the No More Global Directory, a global directory of specialist domestic abuse and sexual violence services. Finally, if you have questions for our guest speaker today, please type them in the Q&A box. We will address as many questions as possible towards the end of the session. Thank you for your cooperation, and we hope you enjoy today's sessions. Banks can play a pivotal role in protecting customers from financial abuse. This session brings together banking leaders from 4 high-income countries, as well as an NGO, to share how the banking sector is responding to this critical issue. Banks are not mandated to do this work, but as you'll hear, they have the potential to make a real difference. In fact, in some countries, they are doing more than statutory agencies. In the structure of this session is that each of our 5 panellists will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves and their work, and then I'll facilitate a panel discussion. So I want to introduce Tiffany Lewin from Westpac Australia. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Thanks so much, Julie. It's a delight to be here. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, and I wear several hats. So I lead Westpac's vulnerability and inclusion strategy. And in simple terms, what that means is that my team sets the standards and drives the capability for Westpac's group's 35,000 employees to provide support and care for our 11 million customers in moments that matter. And that absolutely includes customers experiencing vulnerability, as well as other moments, such as the loss of a loved one. I also serve as part of the Australian Domestic Family and Sexual Violence Commission's Lived Experience Advisory Council. I personally have a lived experience of family violence, sexual violence, and childhood sexual abuse. And I'm really honoured to be able to use those experiences to help shape Australia's response at a national level to harms against predominantly women and children. At Westpac, safety is not a word, it's an action. And we've been on a journey of applying safety by design in our practice and at scale at Westpac Group for about 3 years now, and lots of really exciting thinking and exciting changes coming from that practice and building a new capability. So I'm really excited to be here today and to share a little bit more about the work we're doing.
We're excited to have you here too. Jane Roderick, can we hear from you now?
Hi, great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation on this key topic today. So a bit about me. I've worked for Lloyds Banking Group here in the UK for a number of years in a variety of roles, and I currently head up our group customer vulnerability team, setting out the approach for how we support customers in vulnerable circumstances. We similarly actually work with our trade body, UK Finance, charities and other social organisations to help deepen our understanding and develop solutions to further build on the support we offer customers in vulnerable circumstances, which includes those impacted by domestic and financial abuse. And just to pre-introduce Martin as well, I've also had the privilege of working with and for Martin as we started this work, so it's great to be talking with him again today. Over the past few years, the finance sector in the UK has and continues to really collaborate on this topic, with UK Finance publishing a financial abuse code practice in 2018. I think it now has circa 40 financial organisations signed up to it, and it's been updated a couple of times. In fact, most recently updated a bit earlier this year. It was developed really to raise awareness and understanding of financial abuse within the financial services industry and to guide firms in identifying, supporting victim survivors. If I actually then kind of focus in on Lloyds Banking Group, so our bank brands are signatories to the code, and our approach has been defined in partnerships with experts in the sector, and this has really kind of helped us develop our support, including kind of all frontline colleagues receiving training on domestic and financial abuse, ensuring the disclosures are kind of handled with empathy and discretion. We have a specialist support team which has been in place since 2019, and this really ensures customers are able to speak with colleagues who've received additional specialist training from domestic abuse charities, so Surviving Economic Abuse and Tender, and can offer a range of support options based on individual needs. In fact, it handles around about 1,400 calls a month and has supported more than 4,700 customers in separation of joint accounts. And customers can request support via a number of channels, including secure online forms, and we have features like quick exit buttons in our app and web page. Probably just to kind of close this question out, we do recognise there is more to do, and we are keen to keep developing our service offering. For example, we're looking at adding messaging on our ATM screens from early next year, really to kind of help raise awareness of the topic, and we'll keep collaborating with the financial sector, charities and others.
Thank you so much, and thank you for introducing Martin King, who is formerly from Lloyds, but now of New Zealand, and now in New Zealand at the Bank of New Zealand.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks for my very introduction there, Jane. So Martin King, I'm the General Manager for Customer Assist, which is the Bank of New Zealand's kind of centre of excellence for all operations and strategies and policies, processes to support customers who are in difficult scenarios, whether vulnerable or otherwise. So responsible for complaints, collections and recoveries, our bereavement teams, and also have oversight for our fraud and scams program, alongside particularly our teams who are supporting our most vulnerable customers, whether that's mental health, elder abuse, or indeed family violence. Worked in this space for past 10 years. Indeed started at Lloyds working alongside Jane. If I then look, and it's kind of developed very much from the early stages of what is the topic, what is the bank's role, and then when we come to New Zealand, how in a smaller organisation, I'm noting Tiffany and Jane work for what I would describe as mega banks, but Bank of New Zealand's around about 1 million customers and 5,500 employees, is the ability to kind of move a little bit more nimbly, try things out, but also we have some limitations on our scale as well. So I'm happy to kind of expand a little bit more as we go through, and really looking forward to the conversation with such an illustrious crew on the line. So thank you, Julie.
Thank you. I'm looking for us all expanding on, our areas of expertise. I'd now like to introduce Catherine Fitzpatrick, who is a social entrepreneur, and we'll talk more about what she does.
Thanks, Julie, and hi, everybody. I'm also really excited to follow Tiff and Jane and Martin because I've talked to them over many years. I worked with Tiff. I remember meeting Martin, I think it was almost a decade ago, when you were at Lloyds, and we were talking about domestic abuse, and I've been having some recent conversations with Jane as well. So I'm a former bank executive. I've been working to influence the way that banks respond to domestic and financial abuse for about the last decade, since I kicked off that work in Australia's biggest bank. I'm an adjunct associate professor at the University of New South Wales, and I'm also the author of 3 papers and a forthcoming one, actually, of a 4th one called Designed to Disrupt, which are all about how you apply safety by design in the context of business to really equip businesses to understand the ways that their products and services are being misused and weaponized by domestic abusers, and then equip them on how to close those loopholes so that they can lessen the harm through smarter product design. I now work at Flexibility Ventures, which I set up a few years ago, and I work with governments, regulators, industry, and individual businesses globally on really tailoring safety by design to tackle domestic abuse and to stop people from being able to facilitate that abuse through the use of those systems and products and services. So super excited to have this conversation today.
Thank you. Excited too. And to our last speaker, Hadass Arnon Sharabi, who is the Director of Policy and Legislation at Women's Spirit in Israel.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you, Julie. My name is Hadass Arnon Sharabi, and I come from Israel. I'm a lawyer at the Director of Policy and Legislation at Women's Spirit. Women's Spirit is an Israeli non-profit organization committed to advancing financial independence for women survivors of abuse. We actively work to prevent economic abuse and provide practical economic and professional support, enabling women to regain control over their lives. I'm happy to be here today and to share our work and insights. For over 15 years, Women's Spirit has been steadfastly supporting women in achieving economic independence in Israel. Our support program is personal and long-term, lasting approximately 2.5 years. It combines employment rehabilitation, professional training, financial counseling, and ongoing professional support delivered both individually and in groups. We work with women from all sectors of society, ensuring they receive equal, sensitive, and tailored support without discrimination. Our goal is clear, to give women the tools and confidence to regain economic independence, to manage their finances, the meaningful employment, and rebuild their lives after leaving abusive home. Personal support is essential, but addressing economic abuse requires systemic action. Women's Spirit, therefore, also works at the policy and advocacy level, raising public awareness, guiding professionals, and promoting legislation and policies that help women leave abusive homes and regain financial independence. Among other efforts, Women's Spirit was one of the initiators and drafters of the bill for the prevention of economic abuse, which has not yet become a law in Israel, but we hope it soon will be.
Thank you so much. And I've got a follow-up question for you as I now go into the question component of this panel discussion. So you spoke a little bit about what you do. So how does the Israeli Financial Availability Charter specifically address and help prevent economic abuse within domestic and family violence cases?
Well, it's an important question. Just say a few words first about the responsibility of the banks. Banks and financial institutions are central players in society. They provide essential services, and as such, they carry special responsibilities towards vulnerable clients, especially women affected of economic abuse. Since there is still no dedicated law in Israel defining economic abuse or providing protections for survivors, banks and financial institutions, as providers of essential services, should act today to identify survivors, prevent harm, and offer real protection to them. In doing so, they become a lifeline, helping women regain control over their finances, access services safely, and plan for a stable future. Fortunately, financial institutions in Israel are already acting this way. A clear example is the Financial Availability Charter. The Financial Availability Charter is one of the in Israel financial abuse is one of the quietest yet most destructive forms of domestic violence. It denies women access to their bank account, blocks their ability to make independent decisions, and effectively traps them in a cycle of debts and independence. The difficulty intensifies when women wish to leave abusive homes. In Israel, to provide a real solution to this problem and to support women at the critical moment surrounding their departure from an abusive home, a unique initiative was created, the Financial Availability Charter. This is a voluntary and innovative initiative based on multi-sector cooperation between financial institutions such as banks and credit card companies, the Ministry of Welfare, women's shelters, and social organizations led by Women's Spirit. The Charter goal is twofold. On the one hand, to provide the survivor of abuse with an immediate response, preventing the economic suffocation and the ongoing control of the perpetrator. On the other hand, to create a foundation for the future, tools for economic independence, and the ability to build new stability. To ensure the support is professional, fast, and tailored, a dedicated contact person is appointed in every financial institution, family violence center, and shelter. The role is to accompany the woman personally and make sure that the solutions are actually provided. Through the Charter, women receive practical and diverse solutions, such as opening an independent account, canceling harmful authorization in a joint account, fair distribution of debts, freezing loans or mortgages, and sometimes even small loans that allow fresh start. At the same time, they receive financial guidance and support through strengthening their first steps forward independence. Let me share a story that beautifully illustrates the power of the Charter to support women survivors of economic abuse. A social worker reached out to the Charter to assist a woman survivor who was at risk for her former partner creating debts in their joint account, which still had a small remaining balance at the time. To remove her from the account, the cooperation of the former partner was required with ID verification, but as you can imagine, he refused and threatened to continue spending and accumulating debts. Immediate action was therefore necessary. Within a few hours of the social worker's request, the bank acted. They moved the woman from the joint account, thereby preventing forced debts that could have hindered her recovery and path to economic independence. Thanks to the Charter, the woman was able to regain control over her life and begin building a safe and independent future. In conclusion, the Financial Availability Charter shows how essential services, such as financial services, can provide critical first line of support for survivors of abuse throughout the period surrounding the decision to leave and the departure from the abusive home. Through professional and efficient multi-sector cooperation, it allows women survivors not only to escape economic suffocation, but also to build a safe and independent future.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that wonderful example of how it works. Now, Catherine, you identified the potential of the E-Safety Commission's Safety by Design framework for financial services, and how has this evolved to financial safety by design? Tell us about the Respect and Protect campaign. Why begin with terms and conditions?
Thanks, Julie. I think I was first introduced to safety by design in 2019 when I was working in a bank, and one of my team showed me that a customer that we were supporting had received deposits into their account where there was abuse written in the transaction description field. We analysed 11 million transactions in a 3-month period and found there were actually 8,000 really serious forms of abuse and threats and harassment being sent that way, often for as little as just 1 cent at a time. So I took this data analysis actually to the E-Safety Commissioner and said, have you seen this before? And what should we do about it? And she said, why don't you think about safety by design, which is a framework that she'd developed with the tech sector, saying that actually it shouldn't be up to the user of a tech platform to keep themselves safe. It was up to the platform to make it safer. We can take a look at social media platforms these days and argue whether that is actually happening. I would say it is not. There is harm happening with virtual impunity every day, and it's very serious harm. What I was delighted by was that my bank and then every bank in Australia agreed that we all needed to move on this and apply safety by design. So what that meant is that there were industry-wide reforms regulator changes to the payment system, and banks in Australia have now blocked more than 1 million messages in real time in those last 6 years since we found it. They've sent warning letters to the people who are sending abuse. They're using artificial intelligence and machine learning to look at the patterns of abuse. They're responding to customers, and they're also reporting some of these matters to law enforcement and to intelligence agencies. And we know that, in New South Wales alone, more than 380 intelligence referrals have been made to law enforcement. 12 people have been charged and 5 people have been convicted because of the monitoring of those messages. Fast forward a few years and I wrote the first Design to Disrupt paper, and what I wanted to do was get out of my head, what if we applied that same thinking and the success that we'd seen to that tech-facilitated abuse in banking to every other bank product? So I pretty much catalogued, by talking to people with lived experience, using some of my own knowledge, talking to people in the community sector and with industry, I catalogued the perpetrator playbook for banking and said, every product, these are the ways they are being misused. That was then. I'm sure I'm hearing of new ways now, but here are all the different ways that perpetrators are misusing products. Here's some of the design options that you might want to consider to reduce that opportunity for them to misuse those products and services. I've subsequently published reports for general insurance, for energy and for water, and as I mentioned, I'm looking at telco. What I then said is, well, this is financial safety by design. So you will no doubt hear in this conference from Nicola Sharp-Jeffs and how she did the wheel of economic abuse. Financial safety by design is really tailoring safety by design to tackle domestic abuse, regardless of whatever sector, because we know that financial abuse is a hidden form of domestic abuse, and it does frequently require the misuse of a system. So that's what the framework is. It's got 3 objectives. One is design your products so that they are flexible and safer from misuse. The second is give customers information and choice. And then the third is be clear on the rules and the consequences for misuse. And that leads me to the Respect and Protect campaign. So in that being clear on the consequences, the rules and the consequences for misuse, I made a recommendation to say every bank, and now I believe it's pretty much every organisation globally, should put into their terms and conditions, their contracts with their customers, if you misuse our products for domestic and financial abuse, there will be consequences. We don't want you to do that. It's very harmful. We didn't design our products for that purpose. And some of the consequences might be that we will warn you, that we will suspend your account, we'll close your account, or we might even report you to law enforcement. So I made that recommendation in 2022. The following year, 13 banks had moved on that recommendation. Westpac was one of them. I'm sure Tiffany will talk about that. But I decided that wasn't enough. And anyway, no one reads their terms and conditions. So we needed to tell people about it, because the aim isn't to close people's accounts, it's to change behaviour. We know that if you tackle one of the drivers of gender-based violence, which is the behaviours and the attitudes that lead to violence, then you do start that prevention work and changing culture. So I launched a campaign called Respect and Protect, which was really to showcase the people, the businesses that had already changed their terms and conditions. And we now have more than 60 companies in Australia that are working across 12 different sectors, serving more than 20 million customers who have either put those new terms in place or are working on them. That's banking, insurance, energy, water, education, telco, fintech, financial advice, mortgage brokers, transport. There's even a facilities management company that manages one of our hospitals here who's put it in their supply chain. So we're the first country in the world that has ever done that, and I do think that there is there's a real desire from the companies that I talk to say, actually, we didn't mean to be a safe haven for financial abuse. Of course, we are going to send this message. The hard part is how they implement it, but it is about changing those customer behaviours. I just think back to September 11 when we all got told, you cannot expect to get on a plane if you joke about terrorism. That is what this is trying to do. So this is the behaviour that we expect, and if you don't abide by it, you're going to lose access to your services.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great work. Now, Jane, I want to ask you, what are the challenges when it comes to doing this work, and how do you tackle those challenges?
So no, thank you, and I think a great question. I think if we look at the statistics, so certainly in the UK, I think it's one in 4 women and 1 in 6 men will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime. Whilst those stats are, unfortunately showing the prevalence of it, it's still, as Catherine referenced, a hidden topic and not often talked about. So the very nature of the topic being hidden is a challenge when you're starting to look at what support you might offer and what those interventions might be. I think equally we see people perhaps don't recognise economic abuse as quickly as perhaps some other forms. It's not as well understood or seen. So it is kind of quite often much later in a customer's journey when they recognise that, or they're able to kind of reach out for support. So I think those kind of things are challenging. The complex nature, every scenario can be different. The support someone needs can be different. And it is kind of a big and complex topic. However, I do think things like today and kind of the continued raising awareness, talking about the topic's really important. It's a really key way of kind of challenging that and just keeping talking. Definitely, and you'll hear us maybe talk about it a little bit later, but that kind of working with lived experts and charities and those that really kind of understand and kind of help through that kind of co-creation of support. And we've heard a little bit of that today as well. Understanding where your expertise ends and where you need others to help you can be difficult, because the desire to support is there. But I think we've probably learned it's helpful to start small and build from there, actually, and kind of you'd be amazed at what you can achieve by starting that. And some of the fantastic things we've called out today, I think, of taking that approach. And then probably the last thing I would just kind of cover off really is that kind of collaboration is key. There is a limit to how much we can do on our own or as a sector, and domestic and financial abuse, it doesn't work in isolation. It does sit across sectors and society, and our solutions have to take a similar approach.
Thank you so much for that. And Martin, you were there when Lloyd Banks was stepping in and doing more work around financial abuse, but now you're continuing to do that great work in New Zealand. Just wondering, what are you cooking up?
Well, I think actually what I'll do is I'll just reference back to the start point, because I think it's actually, how do you start? And I think, Catherine, you've referenced abusive messages. And Jane, you will remember the case I'm about to talk to, where you just have this scratch your head moment where normal banking practice gets in the way of doing right, but actually goes a bit further and actually causes lots of wrong. So we had a customer whose perpetrator had attempted murder of them and was then incarcerated. We, as a bank, sent a letter and said, great news, you can get a better rate on your home loan. Give us a call. So they gave us a call. They clearly were on one income at that stage and asked for some support. We said, great, yes, we can definitely help you. Can we have signatures? And can we have both of you attend the bank? Because we want to make sure that both of you receive your disclosures about this very, very important financial product together. The individual explained that actually, no, this is the circumstances. And the bank employee didn't know what to do, didn't know how to respond, and just essentially went back to their training and said, sorry, we can't help. The person then reached out for support for financial hardship. We said, oh, that's really good. We're very able to help and support you. can we have both of you come into the bank because we really want to make sure you both understand the implications of this, all of the downfalls and pitfalls of doing such a thing. No, I can't do that. These are the circumstances. And actually that proceeded all the way to a complaint. And what you had was a moment where all of our regulations, all of our rules, all of our very, very strong training about supporting individuals in getting the information about their financial products was at the heart of continuing the violence against this individual. And what it meant is you had to start to step out of the rules, the regulations, and get people to start to understand the impacts and the outcomes that were being facilitated. So we'd actually end up being able to change policy to, if you are improving the financial position, even at a micro level, reducing cost of borrowing, not making material changes to term, to other areas, go ahead. And I think that's one of the key things we've been working on at BNZ is understanding where those. So I think, Catherine, you talked about the safety by design, which is absolutely awesome. And I think the danger with financial products is they last for a long time. So we're also dealing with the hangover for the last 30, 40, 50 years in some scenarios for the type of financial product. So we have very much started on that safety by design, really tough, and I'm learning lots from Catherine and the work she's done. We are very much cooking up, what do we do to address and rescue? So we set up similarly, I think we love a specialist support team. We love a specialist support team full of lived experience. And we started one actually in 2020. We gave them a very clear remit, focus on the outcome, we'll make the rest of it fit and follow around it. So if the rule is there that's going to prevent you, ignore the rule, but come and talk to us before you do so. So we set up a number of panels where we bring our lawyers, our compliance teams, our credit teams, our product teams together to talk about individual cases. And those are still running weekly, every week, Friday mornings, if anybody wants to come along. And what that does is it allows us to dissect what the actual risk is on the customer and what is the right outcome. What are the appetite settings that we may need to change. Now, these can't be written in policy because then you get back to the scenario where we do poor disclosures for customers. We don't do what we need to do. We don't hit our compliance hurdles. So I think what we really focus on, and what that's allowed us to do, a couple of examples is we opened up a 57-year-old woman, her first sole bank account. And actually, this is the first bank account that this individual had access to ever. We have supported an individual to escape family violence, financial violence, facing bankruptcy. And I think kind of go on to Hadassah's work, we actually helped to buy her first home with her name on the title deeds. We did that alongside an organisation I think James already referenced, working with partners, Good Shepherd in New Zealand, who did the work with the other creditors, because we need to understand how far we can go. We are not other creditors. And this is where it's quite tough when you've got your specialist support team going, we need to do this and we need to phone that bank and this bank. We can't do that. We really need to understand, therefore you need your partners. So I think so just in summary, we're very much in the solve the problems of the past, very clearly support your frontline bankers to know they have flexibility, ask in a safe way, and get support from those people who are the experts in the rules to get in the way of them.
Thank you so much. Cooking up a whole tool bag to end financial abuse. So Tiffany, on to you now. So Westbank has undergone a whole rethink of its approach. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, the conversation's been fantastic. So many linkages and connections to what we're all doing. I think, to build on Martin's comments, a number of years ago, Westpac implemented the same kind of empowerment model to help the people at the front line who are supporting the customer in the moment to better balance following the process and the rules, which are designed to keep them safe and compliant with the reality in front of them. We call it the should we test. And it's pretty simple. If if we, what we can do under the regulations is one thing, but we have to ask the question, should we do it? Is it the right thing? Taking very much that kind of social impact and whole of customer lens. And if you and two other people make the judgment that you should do something different, then you can go ahead and do that. And so I think that where we were a couple of years ago, building on the initial work that Catherine kicked off around abuse in transactions, and the first Design to Disrupt report was just thinking about how do we take an enormous organisation like Westpac Group and scale the thinking that we were doing around vulnerability, the kind of solutions we were finding for customers. How do we build that into something more forward-looking and proactive? And I think the banking industry in Australia, off the back of the Banking Code of Practice, had really focused on supporting frontline team members in recognising vulnerability. There were, upwards of 15 risk factors for vulnerability. How do you build that confidence and capability in your business and make sure that all of the good things being discussed today around escalation, around creative solutions, out-of-the-box solutions, how do you make all of that happen? And that was fantastic. But in recognising the broader application of safety by design and in recognising the intersectionality of this challenge, we needed to simplify how we thought about harms and build out a capability and a toolkit for product and service designers who don't talk to customers every day. This is where the really incredibly exciting and change can happen that creates step change. And I totally acknowledge that we all have big, ugly banking products that have been around forever. But in the interests of not letting perfection get in the way of progress, how do we get started today? And how do we make safety an action, not just a word? And how do we help people who don't talk to customers every day to think in the right ways and consider the unintended consequences of the decisions they're making in the moment? And so that was really the turning point for us. We really went and did a big piece of human-centered design research. We simplified how we framed and thought about vulnerability through the lens of harm and through the lens of where the customer was in their journey, as opposed to the type of vulnerability. And this is really important because we absolutely know that financial insecurity is a trigger for domestic violence. We absolutely know that gambling harm has an intersection with domestic violence. We absolutely know that financial hardship has an intersection with domestic violence. Anything that creates financial insecurity, fraud and scam losses, all of those things are risk factors that can exacerbate or drive a trigger for domestic and family violence. And so in thinking about harms, it's not just about financial abuse. Our framework also stepped into financial loss, such as self-inflicted loss from gambling, loss from scams or fraud. It also stepped into thinking about financial hardship and how choices we're making might increase risk of hardship. So it allowed us to tie together in a simpler way how to think about product and service design, how to think about weaponization or unintended consequences of product and service design in a way that was really relatable for people who don't speak to customers every day. And so that's the journey we've been on for a number of years now. It's now embedded into our product governance, into our initiatives, how decisions get made. It's embedded in the practice of my team providing advisory support, which is north of 1,000 advisory engagements a year inside of Westpac. It is part of how our people think and talk as they are making change. And I think that taking that broader, slightly broader lens and recognizing the intersectionality between financial abuse and those other kinds of financial harms gave us the ability to get going quickly, to not seek perfection, but to make incremental progress step by step. And I think some of the great examples out of that work, you know, we stood up power of attorney abuse monitoring in late 2023. And that came out of a safety by design discussion on if you're going to digitise and enable attorneys to access customer banking via the app, then the harms could look very large and scary. So how do we take responsibility to spot that really quickly and put friction in that process? That work, you know, that work has taught us an enormous amount about how you have conversations with people about their trusted and loved family members who have slipped from benevolent support into malevolent abuse. And if I think about elder financial abuse, it is a gendered issue. It is predominantly elderly women. 64% of financial abuse of older Australians is perpetrated by adult sons and daughters. So this is family violence by another name. I think the other, you know, another really wonderful example, and there's so many to draw from, is something we did really recently. Last week, we launched a feature called Safe Block. It was born out of that insight that often as consumers, we have that spider sense just after we've done something, just after we've paid someone, just after we've had a conversation, and we have that, you know, oh dear moment where we realize, oh, that could have been a scam. My goodness, what do I do? And instead of calling your bank and perhaps being on hold for too many minutes, trying to explain yourself, getting escalated through to a specialist team who can take action, we thought about how do we empower customers to put the brakes on their bank account without blocking their trusted transactions like their mortgage, you know, their mortgage payment or their scheduled credit card payment or their gym membership, but anything else gets locked down. Now that is incredibly valuable, not only for scams, it is for financial abuse as well. And turning our mind to, well, how would applying that block and removing that block be weaponized potentially? And where do we want to put friction in that process? So it's a really exciting but deep practice and capability that we've been developing over a number of years. And, you know, the learning's never done.
Thank you so much for that. I am aware that we only have about 20 minutes left and a few more questions to get through, and I want to hear what everyone has to say. So just please keep that in mind. But I want to go back to Martin for a minute, because Tiffany talked about the importance of frontline staff, and other people have spoken about that as well. How do you ensure frontline staff are equipped to listen and respond appropriately when victim survivors disclose abuse?
So first of all, we actually don't get many that disclose. I think we get many that indicate and offer insight. So we have, again, since creating the team, really thought about what do we expect of our frontline bankers and our frontline colleagues. And we worked on the 95-5 rule. So I expect 95% of my people to know 5%, and I expect 5% of my people to know 95%. So by working on that, we created a spot and refer model. So all I ask our frontline bankers to do is to spot and have a very simple way of referring in. Very clear, warm handoff. Please do not repeat. Please do not ask someone to start from scratch. So listen, take the information, but don't overpromise and don't underdeliver. But understand, but also start to understand, what does it look like? What are the words and phrases? What are the emotional responses? How do people recoil when you say, can we speak to both people? What is the tone of their voice when you start to talk about joint finances? How do you, and it's the nuances of that. And again, you're asking people to do that in an environment that may be incredibly public. So we also ask them to do it safely. We work incredibly hard alongside our safety teams, our customer safety teams, who are looking for a customer aggression. It is not unsurprising, unfortunately, customers who get aggressive, there is always a reason, and that reason is not they are aggressive. And actually trying to understand the frustrations that sit behind that is also quite important. So we've done a lot of education on what we describe as the police of the bank, to get them to understand that they're not just policing bad people, but there'll be a cause and reason behind that. The other team that we've worked hard is, and actually I'm happy, I think, Tiffany, you referenced all the teams that support. I have the joy of owning them. So I have the bereavement team, I have the collections and recoveries team, I have the complaints team. So over time, we've changed the culture, which is not that person can't pay, it's why. And when you start to hear about individual or relationship dynamics, what is behind it? And actually, can we believe people? So not only do you get your frontline bankers doing the 95/5, you also get your specialist teams really considering what sits behind it. What's the diagnosis? And think about financial well-being as financial health. And what are those indicators? What are those contraindicators? What are those symptoms that you are listening, and trust your gut? And I think what we've managed to do, and I would say we are not getting it right 100% of the time. And I also hear the scenario that says, oh my gosh, we're seeing so much more financial abuse. And I would challenge, we are not. We are listening for it. We are hearing it. We are giving people a route to declare it. This is not something that's new. And that's where I think we're getting the advantage. And then having feedback loops to confirm to that person who spotted something, you did the right thing. It is incredibly important to give that feedback loop. So when they hear again, they go again, and they go again. And what that's allowed us to do, to give you a sense of numbers, we are a relatively small bank, but we are receiving, on average, 33% of the referrals to our support team are based in interpartner violence, and that is around about 10 customers every week. That is a lot, but that is 10 more every week than we were doing 5 years ago.
Thank you for that. That's wonderful insights. And Hadass, in cases where, due to various limitations, the financial availability charter could not be applied, what practical consequences did survivors of economic abuse experience as a result?
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, the financial availability charter is important, but it is a voluntary initiative. Sometimes financial institutions cannot or are not allowed to provide assistance under the charter. In such cases, women experiencing financial abuse may end up with forced debts that they never knew about or agreed to, be dragged into legal proceedings such as bankruptcy or enforcement actions, see their financial stability crumble, and feel trapped in an abusive home because they have no way to stand on their own. To support women in cases where the charter cannot provide assistance, additional initiatives in Israel have been created. One of the main ones is the insolvency authority procedure, designed to help women with debts created during an abusive relationship. The procedure was developed in collaboration with Israel Enforcement and Collection Authority, the Ministry of Justice, Shelters for Survivors of Abuse, and civil society organizations, including Women's Spirit. It provides legal and emotional support, assistance in economic recovery, and guidance tailored to the complexity of each survivor situation. All of this ensures that the response is professional and well adapted, and enables women to navigate the process and achieve recovery and renewed economic independence. The need for initiatives like this highlights the critical importance of promoting legislation to prevent economic abuse in Israel. Such a legislation would define economic abuse precisely, classify it as civil wrong or a crime, establish legal protection and remedies for survivors, and ensure that the state acts proactively instead of relying on multi-sector initiatives. When it comes to legislation, I'd like to conclude on an optimistic note. In recent years, there have been significant efforts to advance a dedicated bill to prevent economic abuse in Israel. and to include clear definition of it within Israel's domestic violence laws. Many stakeholders in Israel are deeply committed to this goal, and Women's Spirit is proud to be among those leading the way. I truly hope that we'll soon have positive news in this regard.
I hope so too. So Jane, how do you collaborate with not-for-profits to improve outcomes for victim survivors?
So I think for us, actually, right from the start, actually, when we started looking at this topic, working with, as I said earlier, they're kind of those lived experts, people that kind of charities and understanding has been a kind of key part for us, I think, working in partnership throughout our journey. From the kind of when we were setting up the domestic and financial abuse team, we actually embedded somebody from a charity into our organisation to kind of help us with that knowledge and upskill. Looking at our policies and understanding where are the places we can mitigate harm and really kind of make a difference for customers, through to things like we've heard quite a lot today about colleague training, but actually again with the experts in the sector and lived experts helping kind of bring those to life from a knowledge perspective. We also run panels with lived experts and other organisations, again, to put our products and services through, again, accessing that knowledge and expertise to help us in that kind of co-design and really and assuring we get the outcomes that we're looking for customers. And actually, it also supporting our colleagues. So we have a large colleague base as well. So actually kind of raising that awareness with colleagues for how we support them. Again, working with organisations like Surviving Economic Abuse or Tender in the UK to do that. So I think I probably could go back to what I said earlier. It's really about understanding where our expertise, finance is there, but actually how do you work with experts in the sector to make sure your products and services are meeting the needs of customers.
Thank you so much for those insights. Now, Catherine, you started with banking, then you looked at general insurance, and most recently essential services. Are there plans to extend safety by design principles to other sectors such as superannuation or telecommunications?
Yes is the answer to that. I'm currently working on the next Design to Disrupt paper. I've had a wonderful intern from the Harvard Kennedy School doing that work with me, doing international and domestic research about the ways that telecommunication products are being weaponized for financial abuse. And in that sector, you're seeing so much more of that intersection of financial abuse and technology. And through that, we've got examples of perpetrators controlling all devices on the account, using that for surveillance, frustrating number porting by stopping that person from leaving and being able to take their telephone number with them. Lots and lots of different examples and incredibly rich insights from the survivors that we have engaged through that, so that more than 60 people have been engaged in that process, and just shocking stories and experiences that they've had. At the moment, really in Australia, the laws are changing around domestic abuse and telecommunications, and there will be some new guidance on safety by design and inclusion by design released for telcos. I'm just trying to work out when I can get the paper finished so we can launch it. What I would say is there's also governments now looking at that approach. So there has been a review in the Commonwealth government, so the full Australian government, looking at the ways that their systems are being weaponised. And then they've developed new safety by design guidance, and I've been advising on both of those programs. In New South Wales, similarly, they're also looking at that through their government services. And then we're seeing that happen across banks in the Asia Pacific. I know there'll be a session later today. And also I'm working with a regulator in Papua New Guinea, the Bank of Papua New Guinea. So I would say if you are working in any sector, you should start with talking to people with lived experience about what's happening with your products and services. The papers are there. They are a great starting point. There's different cultural contexts. But unless you know the risks and the ways that your products are being weaponized, you can't necessarily take the action to get up the curve. So you must start with supporting victim survivors as your customers. But until you can then make your products and services safer, unfortunately, people are going to find ways to get around it. We've seen it with scams. That costs $2 billion a year in scams losses in Australia. In Australia, it costs $5.7 billion a year in losses to financial abuse. So the scale is much larger. There is a big responsibility on anyone who works in business.
Thank you so much, and more power to your arm with everything that you are doing. Now, this is quick fire questions as we come to the end. This particular question is for Jane, Martin and Tiffany, and I'll ask Tiffany to respond first. What are your priorities for the next phase of reform to address financial abuse in banking?
So from a reform perspective, and Catherine mentioned there's been a national government review, the Joint Parliamentary Inquiry into Financial Abuse. Absolutely, there is reform needed to enable better collaboration and referral in these circumstances. I think from Westpac's perspective, my team leads a lot of experimentation and data work across the group to understand and broaden our perspective and insights on vulnerability. And my priority, and I think where we need to be, is to move from reactive into proactive in terms of identifying cohorts where we're on notice that harm's happening, irrespective of whether the customer has explicitly told us or not. And that goes absolutely beyond financial abuse, but I think that that's the next phase for banking. It's tricky and there's lots of work to do and lots still to learn, but that's a real priority. And then collaboration must come because we all have pieces of the puzzle. And I think, as everybody, Catherine and others from Australia have talked about, there's an enormous energy and goodwill across sectors within banking, but also in sectors outside of banking to partner and solve this together. We are absolutely stronger together, but we need some reform to accelerate that.
Sounds like a great next phase. Martin, what about for you?
Very similar in terms of reform. I think what we have is our Consumer Credit Act in New Zealand, which essentially provides great protections, consumer protections, but essentially has nothing inside it to support victim survivors of economic abuse. The ability to provide hardship provisions to individuals whose perpetrator partner is incarcerated is almost non-existent. And actually, you're having to ask bankers to take risks with the law and disclosures. So we need to make that normal, and it shouldn't be reliant upon an organization willing to take a risk. It should be that the entire law enables and actually forces all organizations to do the right thing at the right time.
Thank you. And Jane, what about you? What are your priorities?
Yeah, so I'll focus just a little bit more probably on our organisation. So just really continuing the conversation, raising awareness, kind of doing things like today, but like raising awareness, keeping the conversation alive, building on the work we've done. We touched on kind of working with the sector. So the sector in the UK has done a lot of work in this space, but recognises the need to kind of standardise and continue that collaboration. So more of that, more collaborating across sector. Again, I think similar to so Tiffany referenced it there as well, and continuing to improve, continuing to listen to lived experts, work with charities to understand what are those gaps and things we need to focus on to kind of help customers.
Thank you so much. And Hadass, I've got the last question for you. How can Women's Spirit as an NGO help ensure that the Financial Availability Charter is implemented effectively and maintained over time so that survivors of economic abuse continue to receive its protections?
Well, I start by saying that the Financial Availability Charter is already working successfully, and it is pleasing to see financial institutions committed to its implementation and effectively supporting women. Still, when needed, Women's Spirit serves as a bridge between financial institutions and social workers, helping guarantee the process runs smoothly and continues to assist survivors. Building on these ongoing achievements, Women's Spirit supports the effective implementation and ongoing application of the Charter, making sure it continues to benefit survivors through a variety of coordinated efforts, which I will now present. First, through training and ongoing guidance for social workers. We hold at least 4 dedicated lectures each year on the Charter and how to use it, and provide individual support to any question, whether a case is eligible for support under the Charter, and how to fill out forms and submit a request. The guidance covers all steps, from the initial assessment to the exact way to make the referral. Second, we maintain regular contact with banking and governmental bodies like the Bank of Israel, the Banking Association, and the Ministry of Social Affairs and others, to remove barriers and ensure prompt and professional responses. The collaboration, I have to tell you, is close, serious, and driven by a strong sense of mission. Third, through an online learning platform available to all social workers. The platform brings together all key information about the Charter, objectives, how to implement it, forms, and common question and answers, so that knowledge gaps and bureaucratic barriers are avoided. Fourth, raising awareness and bringing voices from the field. The Bank Supervision in Israel holds an annual conference on the Charter, where successes and challenges in its implementation are presented to regulators, bankers, and civil society organizations. Fifth, an online course for bankers has recently been launched, aimed at raising awareness of the warning signs of economic abuse and providing practical tools to help bankers identify, support, and in certain circumstances, maybe even guide women survivors of abuse to the Charter. In this way, we ensure that the Charter is implemented in practice and maintained over time, so that as many women survivors of economic abuse as possible continue to receive the protection and support it provides. Finally, looking at usage data, it is interesting to know that according to Bank of Israel, between 2016 and 2025, the Charter has already assisted approximately 3,000 women, a milestone highlighting its vital importance.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank all the speakers. You, Tiffany, you said that safety needs to be an action and not a word. And what we've heard from all of you today about how safety has been translated into action. And I hope our audience today have got some great takeouts from it. So thank you so much.